word of Torah to begin. Simeni chachotam al libecha, kachotam al zroecha. So says Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs, the Bible's great love poem. Let me be a seal upon your heart, like the seal upon your arm. Ki azah chamavet ahava. For love is fierce as death. Passion is mighty as Sheol. Its darts are darts of fire, a blazing flame. The Midrash reads those words, love is fierce as death, or love is as intense as death, and adds this thought, Ahava she'ahavu doro shel shmad. What's being described is the love that the generation of persecution had for the Holy One of Blessing. And then the Midrash quotes a line from the Psalms. Ki alecha hiragnu kol hayom. For we are killed all day long for you. The Midrash was written in the 6th century, in the 500s. But somehow managed to anticipate events of the 20th century. And that line, for love is fierce as death, love is as intense as death, is quite a good introduction to the remarkable book that Mindelle Pierce has written. Mindelle's book is called Love with No Tomorrow. The publisher's note about it reads as follows: love at first sight during the Holocaust. Bonds as strong as steel forged in the flames of hate. These are extraordinary stories of love affairs during the most dangerous, degrading, and deadly conditions of genocidal persecution. That's love that is as fierce as death. And that is Doro Shel Shmad, the generation of persecution. The extreme lengths to which two people will go to express their love. The superhuman strength that is derived from such love is the stuff of miracles and endless inspiration. This little-known aspect of the Holocaust, seen through the eyes of those in love, is a unique contribution to our understanding of the best and the worst qualities of human nature. This book, the publisher's note concludes, must be read by anyone who wants to know more about life and love, enduring the most horrendous conditions one could imagine. The author of the Song of Songs already knew 2,500 years ago that love is as fierce as intense as strong as death itself. Mindelle Pierce's book chronicles the love of Doro Shel Shmad, of the generation of destruction, and demonstrates powerfully, poetically, beautifully, that indeed love is not just as fierce and as intense as death, but more fierce, more intense, indeed even stronger. It is a beautiful honor for us to be able to welcome Mindelle Pierce here to Beth Am Israel. I won't bore you all with my long connection and relationship with Mindelle. Suffice it to say, we've known each other for more than 20 minutes. This evening, we've invited her to be in conversation with two of her grandchildren. So I want to invite you to say hello to Hannah Charlson, who is on that screen right about now. And we can
She's on the screen.
can we spotlight Hannah?
Hi, everyone.
I can't turn up my mic. No.
Hi, guys.
Hello, Hannah. Hannah from her dorm room in Poughkeepsie, is that right?
Yeah, Poughkeepsie, New York.
There she is. There she is. And say hello to Zev Charlson, who is right here.
Hello, everyone.
And Mindelle, your grandchildren have some questions for you.
They do?
They do. We've been working on this for hours. And I've already forgotten who's going first. Zev is going first.
I'm going to go first.
Zev is going first.
So the first question that we have for you is, what first got you thinking about the topic of love and romance during the Shoah? It seems so counterintuitive.
I think it was the fact that my parents, Raizel and Jack Najman, talked endlessly about their love for each other, what they did for each other, how they met during the war. And that, I said to myself, if they have a love story, I believe that other people might have a love story that came out of the darkness, the most dark period of the 20th century. So I decided to explore that after interviewing my parents for the Transcending Trauma project that I've been working on for over 20 years. And that spark hit me, and I said, I am going to investigate love during the Holocaust. And that's my answer.
Thank you. Hannah?
Hannah, it's you.
All right. Thank you, Sapta. So my next question is, other than the love story of your own parents, which is such a beautiful and meaningful story, what's your favorite romance in the book?
What, second part of what you said?
What's your favorite romance in the book?
Well, other than my parents,
Other
of
than your
course.
parents.
I think the BAI story, actually it's the first story in the book, the BAI family, and they actually have a museum, a tiny museum about their love story and about their life that's still open in Tel Aviv. And we met the BAI daughters in Margate as they were presenting a story about the love story of their parents to our community in Margate, New Jersey. And they were tired between the afternoon presentation and the night presentation. So we invited them to our house to sleep for a few hours and fed them. And we became very close friends after that. And their story is really, it's magnificent.
So what's their story?
Here we go. Okay. We'll give you the short version of their story. They met in the Plaschkov concentration camp. They were both in the camp, and they were one day in the camp. Mr. BAI, Joseph, was standing in the outskirts of the camp because he was holding a paper up on a cloudy, frigid day, kind of to the sky. And she walked by, Rebecca, and she said, what are you doing? And he said, actually, he started the conversation. He asked her, would you be my sunshine? She didn't even know what that meant. Nobody flirted or talked to her like that. In the 2 years she was in the camp, she didn't understand what he meant. And he said, I need the sunshine, I need the sunshine. Joseph needed to make a copy of the camp grounds for the feared Commandant Amon Goth, who was the commander of the camp. And he had, by 5 o'clock, he had been ordered to make a copy of the drawing of the camp, because Amon Goth wanted to enlarge in the camp, and we didn't have a Xerox machine there, and we used the sun on sensitive paper in order to make a copy. So when he asked her to be his sunshine, she didn't believe that he was talking to her in that way, kind of flirting with her. And she walked by, she left. She had just done a manicure for Amon Goth. She was the manicurist. She was actually a nurse, but she was trained and she did a manicure. When she did the manicure, they told me, for Amon Goth, he had a pistol on the table next to where she was manicuring. And he said, if you nick my hand, if you nick it, you're getting killed. So that's the terms under which she was giving the manicure. She left, the sun came out, and he was able to make a copy, and that saved his life. Well, he felt as though his meeting was the luck symbol that saved his life by meeting her. And he looked for her. He didn't know exactly where to find her. He wanted to give her flowers to thank her. So he collected some flowers, weeds and flowers, to thank her. And he goes into the office to give them to her, where she found out she was working. And the person that's sitting at the edge of the office said, what flowers for? He said, I want to give them to Rebecca to thank her. He said, are you crazy? Flowers in a concentration camp? Goth sees that, you're a dead man. And he takes the flowers and he throws them into the trash can. However, the gentleman who was sitting at the desk told Rebecca that he risked his life to thank her for what she did. And they met the next day walking along the grounds of the camp. And they started talking to each other and started sneaking little times that they could spend together with each other. And then he asked her if she would marry him. She said, marry you here? This is a death camp. This is not how we start our new life. And he said, we don't know if we'll be here tomorrow, the next week. Let's get married. And they got married in the Plaschkov concentration camp. It's the only couple that ever got married in a concentration camp. It was depicted in Schindler's List, but Spielberg used a chuppah, like the chuppah here. He had a chuppah. They did not have a chuppah when they got married there. He took his 4 rations of bread from one day, and he found a man that had silver spoons. The next week, he saved up his 4 rations of bread, and he found a jeweler that took the silver spoons and made 2 silver rings, one for him and one for Rebecca, that they would use when they got married in the camp. They got married. We visited it, actually, in bunk 13 at the camp. They got married in the camp. His mother performed the ceremony. No rabbi, as they had in Schindler's List. She performed the wedding ceremony for them, and they actually got married together. They celebrated that 2 anniversaries every year. That was the 1 anniversary they celebrated. Then after the war, they survived, and they got married in Krakow, and that was their second wedding so they had 2 wedding anniversaries every year. They always wore these rings that they had made for them. And a tragedy was about to occur because Joseph was supposed to be sent to Auschwitz out of the Plaschkov concentration camp. He got on a list and he was supposed to be sent to Auschwitz. Now, Rebecca, going along with the themes in my book, which I found 2 themes, strong women was one of the themes that I found in the book, and a righteous Gentile. Many of my stories have a woman in the lead and a Gentile helping the couple. She went over to this man in the camp and she saw his name, her husband's name was on the list to go to Auschwitz. Rebecca knew if he went to Auschwitz, he would never make it there. She, who was what we call a polyglot, she spoke 7 languages. She said, I know how to navigate the system. I want my name on the list. And she took his name off the list. She went to the head person there who owed her a favor. And what was the favor? The man that she went to was about to kill the mother of the secretary who worked for Amen Goth. And she stopped him from killing the mother. She said, you can't kill Amen Goth's secretary's mother. They will kill you for doing that. So he never did it. He didn't kill this older woman. And she went to him and she said, you owe me a favor. I stopped you from that killing that woman. You would have been murdered for doing that. You owe me a favor. Get my name off the list and put my husband's name there. So she saved her husband. She goes to Auschwitz and he remains in the camp, in the Plaschkov concentration camp. When she's leaving to go to the camp, he gives her, I'm looking for the little poetry book. He made her, it's somewhere here. Is there a poetry book? Anyhow, he took the cigarette butts that the Nazis smoked and he collected them. They stamped them out, he picked them up, and he made a book, I'll show it to you later, about this big, of 10 love poems that he wanted Rebecca to have when she went away as a memory of their love. She did take them. This book survived Auschwitz, this poetry book. They have it there in the museum. And it was a beautiful tribute to the love that he had for her. And later I'll show you this, the poem that I was going to read was called The Parting, of how he wanted her to always remember the love that they had at the camp, that they were going to have. They were going to have a future. They were going to build a life together. And this was part of the poetry book that he made her. And as I said, it survived the war. She kept it. And it is on exhibit at it's called the BAU, B-A-U house in Tel Aviv. If you ever get to Tel Aviv, it's a very beautiful, sweet little museum that many classes come through. BAU became the Walt Disney of Israel. He started animation in Israel after he survived the war. They were able to go to, make it to Israel. And we were thrilled to find out that he had magnificent calligraphy skills. He had this Gothic way of writing. And he took these skills and he used them for Goth in the concentration camp. And after the war, he was responsible for forging. They needed somebody to forge a passport for Eichmann. When the Mossad caught Eichmann, captured Eichmann from Argentina, they wanted to bring him back on trial in Israel. And they needed a passport for him to get out of Argentina and to get into Israel. Well, he forged the passport and he made it through. They were very nervous about it, but they gave him a disguise and he made the passport for them. So on the traveling Eichmann exhibit, which was traveled all over the United States, Ira and I made sure that he got credit, that Bao got credit for the forging of his papers, because that's really what got him out. So he became the animator of Israel, and that was he felt his payback to the Mossad for helping them with that project. And next question.
Since the book came out, have you heard additional Shoah love stories? Any that you might want to share with us?
I can't share any of them, one or two, because I don't have permission yet from the people that I'm talking to. Because now that people have learned a little bit about the book, I've been getting people contacting me about additional stories. So maybe we'll do a second volume is what I'm saying, perhaps. So I cannot share that with you yet. I don't have.
But there are more stories.
There are more stories.
All right. Lovely. Hannah?
Does that surprise you, Rabbi, that there are more stories?
No.
Good.
No, I would have expected that the appearance of your book would, I don't know if expected, but I would have hoped that the appearance of your book would have motivated some more stories to come to the surface, and it sounds like it has.
Right.
Beautiful. Hannah.
Okay, it's my turn. So Safta, as you know, it's my generation that's going to be the one that has to keep these stories alive and make sure that we never forget. So my question is, what's your message to my generation? Why do we need to know about the Holocaust?
What was the question?
What is your message to our generation, and what do we need to know about the Holocaust, and why should we care about it?
First, I have to say that one of the messages I would say for this generation is, if you see something happening somewhere that you feel is not right, you must stand up and say something. You cannot be silent. Silence always, according to Elie Wiesel, helps the perpetrator. You must get out there and bring it to the attention, whether it's in school, whether it's a policeman, whether it's a rabbi, whoever it is. You must call attention to whatever you learned, that you heard. You can't let it go and say, oh, that was a one-time incident, let's forget about it. It has to be brought out. You cannot be a bystander. You cannot be a bystander, would be one of the messages. And the second message is, I think every state should be mandated to teach Holocaust education. Many states are, not enough, but I think this is a vital issue that we have to deal with, that Holocaust education, what happened, what led up to it, what we can do about it, how we can talk about it, what steps can we take in order to not have this hatred just burst forth and create divisions between people.
That's lovely. Great answer. My great-grandparents, your parents, they have an incredible story that I've heard many times. They had 4 separate wedding ceremonies. Could you tell the story for us today?
Yes, I would be honored to do that. They had these weddings because when the war broke out, my mother said to my father, since you signed up for the Polish-French army to fight the Nazis, when you're called up to fight, I won't have any kind of way of living. I won't have any income. But if we get married and I'm your wife, very practical woman, said, then I will have a way of getting support from the government. So my father said, how can we get married? I mean, to them, a wedding was a simcha. It was joyful. How can we get married? My father's town was on the Polish-German border, was one of the first towns to be annihilated in the Holocaust. He said, I don't know if anyone's alive. Communication stopped in Paris. I don't know what happened to how can we have a chasana, a wedding? So my mother said, then let's get married in the mayor's office, okay? So we'll just have a civil service. So my father agreed, he'll have a civil service. They went to the Marie, M-A-R-E's office in Paris, and 10 couples got married in a line. My parents hardly spoke French, so they didn't even understand what they were kind of saying in the ceremony. Anyhow, they knew they were married, the 10 couples were married, and they leave the Marie's office in Paris, and they're happy they're married, but this is not a Jewish chasana. They didn't even understand it. So they walk along the streets in Paris, and my father sees how he described a short man wearing a caputa, a black long coat over black pants, with a book under his arm and a black little hat. And he said, Kim Razel, let's talk to this man. My mother goes over with him, and he says to the man, Du bist a Yid? Are you Jewish? And the man nodded his head. And my father said, you see, we just were married in the mayor's office. We don't even understand French well. We need a little Yiddishkeit. We need something in Yiddish to bless our marriage. Could you give us a blessing? And the man said yes, and my mother put her head down, and my father, and he chanted the Sheva Brachos, the 7 blessings that we do in many Jewish weddings. So they got married the second time. They called that their street wedding. Okay? 3rd wedding. They finally get out, and I'll show you the article. They're on the last boat out of Europe to America. Hayas, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, who put them in a hotel. We just actually got a bill. I have a bill for $18 because Hayas put them in a hotel for 2 nights while they're waiting for this boat. They managed to get passage on the boat called the Navamar. You needed to buy a ticket for the Navamar or any other boat in America. So you could have all the money you needed in Paris, which my father had money. You couldn't buy the ticket. You needed to purchase it in New York. Anyhow, my father's uncle purchased a ticket. My mother's uncle separately purchased a ticket. You had your name on a list. Every day they waited to see if their name would come on. Finally, they get on this boat called the Navamar. So Hayas said to my father, you stay with this group. A rabbi was rescuing yeshiva boys. And the rabbi said, stay with this group. So my father went with the group on the boat, and he was hanging around with them all the time. And my mother kept on coming a lot to the group. And the rabbi said, this is no good, no women here. So my father said, but that's my Rosie, I'm married to her. He said, you didn't tell me you were married. He said, well, we got married in the mayor's office. We didn't even understand that. Then we kind of got married at blessings in the street. He said, where's your ketubah? He said, ketubah? This is a war. We don't have anything. He said, no, this is not good. I am marrying you on the boat. So on the Navamar, which was zigzagging the Atlantic, why? It was being bombed by the Luftwaffe from above. It was getting submarine bombs from underneath. So it took 49 days to cross the Atlantic, a 7-day kind of trip. So now he said, you're going to get married on the boat. So my parents got married for the third time on this boat with their new yeshiva boy mishpucha around them. My mother was the only woman, and they got married on the boat. And where do you consummate your marriage on this boat? On this boat were many lifeboats that were hanging on the outside of the boat. Every night, women and men lined up for a turn in the lifeboats. So this was the consummation on their wedding night of their wedding. Okay, so now we are married. 7 weeks later, we arrive in New York. Okay, 7 weeks. They never complained about it. The rich people, they were wealthy German people on this boat. They were furious that the boat took 49 days and the food on the boat was miserable. They actually took cows who were on the boat. My father said, could you imagine? There were cows on the boat. They used the cows to kill them so that they would have meat on the boat. Anyhow, they get off the boat. My uncle picks up my mother, and my father's standing next to her. And my uncle said, Razel, who's that? She said, oh, my husband, you didn't tell me you were married. I'm saving you. I'm getting you an apartment. She said, well, we got married in the street. Then we got married on the boat. He said, where's your ketubah? What kind of wedding? No, he was very observant. This is no good. This was on a Monday. Thursday, we're going to the rabbi's office in the Bronx, taking here. I have all the certificates, by the way, to show you. He took my parents to the rabbi's house in the Bronx, and they got married again. Okay, so now everybody's happy. They're married. They're living in the Bronx. And then it became 1989. It was 50-year anniversary for my parents. And I said, they really never had a chassan, a wedding with a band and a smorgasbord and a big cake. You know, I have to do this for them. And it was a Shira's, but it was a Shira, my youngest daughter's bat mitzvah. And I said, Shira, you have to share this party with my parents. It's their anniversary date. They never had anything. And because you're such a good girl and are doing that, Ira and I will take you to Israel. You'll have another bat mitzvah in Masada, and we're taking you to Egypt, which we did. We went to Israel and Egypt with the first daughter, make her happy. But my parents had, and we took this chuppah that's hanging here, and the one surviving brother of my mother, Uncle Lou, walked my mother down the aisle. And my father, his only surviving sister from Paris, who he saved, walked my father down the aisle. And the children, including Leah, all of my kids did the Sheva, 7 blessings for my parents. So they had a real magnificent, finally wedding. And under this chuppah is all the kids on the bottom. Those are the children. It says Rose and Jack Najman. That's the names of some of the kids are on there. And you all use this chuppah to get married under. We took it to Israel when Bess and Kobe got married. We wrap it up, and it went to California. Jenny Peterson used it. We've loaned it out to many people to use for weddings. So that's the story of our
Amazing.
chuppah.
I love it.
Thank you. Thank you, Zeb.
So it's 5 weddings, really.
5.
5.
Yes.
Wow.
To the same person. That's a record.
It might be a record. It might be. Hannah.
All right. So the Holocaust has been over for a little while now, but as we know, anti-Semitism is still hasn't gone away. So my question, or the last question we prepared for you is: are you worried about the future, or are you optimistic and hopeful? Are you both? What? Yeah, I'd love to know what you think.
Are you optimistic and hopeful. Like, how are you feeling?
I think it's a combination, a little worried and hopeful. I think I feel both ways about the future. I hope that in now, in the 20th century, today, that we can dialogue, would be my hope and prayer, that people will be able to dialogue with each other. I mean, and I know it's a prayer, that when something crops up, when there is something that happened, when there is an event, that we can use through the United Nations, which I know has a sketchy background as far as settling problems, but it would be my hope that in the future, with this new generation of youngsters that are growing up, that we can learn from our past, from the lessons of the past, is vital for us to learn and seek a peaceful solution to problems.
That is all the questions that we prepared for you today.
Do you have any more questions?
We're about to find out.
Okay.
We're about to find out.
I'd like to start with a small one. How did Rebecca become Rose?
How did
Rebecca become Rose?
Rebecca is Rose. No.
Razel.
Razel. Well, Razel.
Razel is Rose.
Razel. Razel.
Rebecca was the first couple.
No.
Oh, I'm confused. Okay, sorry. I guess.
Rebecca was Bow, no?
Bow was the first story.
Yeah.
Correct, Rebecca Bow.
Yeah.
I asked her first. She was confused. I was paying attention.
You were thrown under the bus a bit.
It happened in the Holocaust, but apparently in synagogue.
No, we're through that phase.
Mindelle, could you explain how your parents ended up from Poland in Paris before the war started?
Yes.
Let me repeat the question because folks on Zoom will not have heard it otherwise. The question is, explain how it is that your parents from Poland ended up in Paris at the beginning of the war.
Okay. Two different reasons. They didn't know each other. First, my father went to visit his sister Helen, who lived in Paris and had just had a baby. And he was very close to her because his mother died when he was 10 years old. And Helen became kind of the mother, the older sister of the house. So he was very close to her. And he said, I'm visiting Helen in Paris and see her new baby and see what life is like. You couldn't leave Poland until you served in the army. They would not let you leave Poland because they knew you probably wouldn't come back. So therefore, you had to put in your 2 years in the army. He put his 2 years in. As soon as he finished, he went to Paris. And as he said, Paris, compared to his shtetl and Prushka, there wasn't one thing they had in common. You know, he said always said there were more people on one square block in Paris than there were in the shtetl, you know, where they live in a tiny little shtetl. So he loved it there. And he was a tailor, he learned how to be a tailor at 10 years old from his older brother. So he got jobs right away. He made a lot of money. When you were a tailor at that time, even though his papers were stamped sans profession, without profession, he got half the money that everybody else did in the sewing flat. You sewed in someone's apartment. And he had a place to hide in case the police came because his papers were stamped sans, S-A-N-S, profession, not allowed to work. But that's how he made a living, and he did very well with that in Paris. And we visited his flat because we have all of my father's addresses where he was when he was living. He was very meticulous in keeping records. So Ira and I went to visit his flat on Boisnard Street, where he met my mother. She was on the 4th floor, he was on the 1st. And we were very lucky because when we went to Paris, a man was opening the door that we were looking at on 40 Barnard Street. I said, can I please come in? Can I come in? I want to see I knew it was a winding staircase. I knew he was arrested, but he was interrogated by the Gestapo on the second floor. I kind of wanted to go to the second floor to feel what it was like. And the man said, not only can you come in, but Madame Rosa lives on the 4th floor and she's 93 years old. I'm going to introduce you to Madame Rosa. And she introduced Ira and I to Madame Rosa, and Madame Rosa knew my father. So we interviewed her on videotape. We were very excited and she took me into the apartment where my parents met, which was across her hall. So it was a beautiful, beautiful, it was magnificent that we were able to do that. And on the second floor, I kind of stood when the Germans came to arrest, looking for my father. They said to my father, his name is Jack Nashman. Do you know Jack Nashman? Now he's on the second floor and it's 4 floors. And my father said, yes. And that was smart. He said, I know him. They said, good. Where does he live? And my father said the truth, 4th floor. They went up to the 4th floor to arrest my father. And my father went down and out of the building, and that was the end. He never came back there, ever came back to 40 Barnard because he was scared. I said, Dad, where'd you go? What did you do? How do you think? And one thing about Michael Berenbaum, scholar of the Holocaust, said, you got to think fast on your feet. The survivors, you had to think 1, 2, 3. And my father said, I'm going to my cousin's house whose husband was rounded up last week. They put a mark on her door that I guess the man was taken out of the house. They'll never come back there to look for anybody. So he went to hide in her house for at least 3 months until he escaped to Vichy, France. You know, France was divided into 2 sections. Paris occupied France and Vichy, France. And there was a demarcation line that separated Vichy, France from Paris, the northern part. And if you needed to mail a letter to America, mail didn't go out of Paris. You had to cross the demarcation line and go into Vichy. Well, my father needed an income form in order to come into America. He was sponsored. You needed to show that somebody would take care of you. If you didn't have enough money, if you didn't earn a living, you needed to show that you had a relative that would take care of you. My mother had to get that paper from my father's uncle. And she said, Jack, it's easier for a woman to cross the demarcation line. I'll go. I'll mail the letter for you. She gets to the demarcation line and she kind of flirts with the German soldiers on the demarcation line. She said, I'm just going to visit a girlfriend in Vichy. And they let her cross over the demarcation line. She met a woman having a cup of coffee in a little round table in an outdoor cafe. She said, please, could you do a favor for me? Can you mail this letter to America? It's for my husband's uncle to sponsor my father. And that's where the American embassy was, on that side of Vichy. And can you imagine the chutzpah? Never met her before. Can you put your return address on the letter? So the letter will come back. You will get the letter, please, and then you will bring it to the American embassy in Vichy. And that lady, not Jewish, woman, took the letter, and we know my parents never contacted. My father lamented that his whole life. I should have thanked her. She saved my life. She took the letter that came from America and brought it to the American embassy. And we know because my father received his papers to come to America. That's how I knew that this woman helped her. So that was the strong part about my mother saying, I will do it, I can do it, I'm getting it done. Anything else? Hannah?
The question that was asked was how they really met. And there was a reason for those two meeting because they were put together because your mom needed something and your father showed her how to do it. You could tell that was how they actually met, right?
Yes, they,
The question is a little more detail about how they actually met.
yes. My mother's sitting on the first floor, my father is on the fourth floor, and she's talking to a girlfriend. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? My visa has expired. I just got a letter from my sister, my mother said. I just got a letter from my sister in Poland that said, do anything, never come back to Poland. Do not come back to Poland. My mother said, what am I going to do? I have all these papers. It was called a paper trail. You needed several visas in order to leave France to get to America. In other words, you needed a document to go from north part of France to Vichy. You needed another document to enter Spain where you would get your boat. So you needed 4 visas in order, different documents, and each one had a date stamped on them. And till you waited for one to get the other, the first one expired. So many times you hired what my father called an expediter. You gave him money and he expedited the problem for you by bringing the papers, by paying somebody. It was an incredible, difficult, especially with a language barrier, to get all of these visas to go from one country to another. Then when he actually finished getting his visa in France and they knew they had to get to Spain, my mother had her papers first. He said, Raizel, go, get out of here, you gotta leave. She didn't want to leave him. He said, you have to go, I'm putting you on the train, you are leaving Spain and you will wait for me. I will send you a telegram. We will make up a place where they meet. They made up a place where they meet and I have a telegram at home. It says, Dr. Miller performed the operation. It was a success on Tuesday. I said, Dad, what's this who's Dr. Miller? Never heard of him in our family. Dr. Miller was the man who gave out the visas in the embassy. My mother knew his name, my father knew his name. So they used him as their code. He got his visa, he couldn't say that, performed the operation, it was a success, and she waited for him by trains and trains. And finally, one day he does get into the southern part of France. My mother waited for a week at every train that came in, and the Germans are checking all the papers. My father needed one more visa. My father had to go to the prefecture of the police every month because they wanted to make sure he wasn't working. He was not allowed to work, and they wanted to make sure that he was not working. They asked him, how did he get money? How did he get food? He said, I'm eating very little. I got a little bit from a neighbor. Anyhow, he did not have one stamp from the prefecture of the police. So he was nervous that the Germans were going to check his papers. Okay, they checked when they left Paris, 4 men at one table. The German officer checks man 1, man 2, man 3, gets to my father, man 4, father would have been arrested. What happens? The whistle blows on the train. The Germans have to get off the train. So now my father is breathing a sigh of relief, but what do I do when I get off the train? I'm gonna have the same trouble. Gets off the train, my mother's waiting at the train, and the people are lining up to get off. The Germans are checking to see if everybody's papers in order. My father would have been arrested immediately. And my mother comes over and kisses my father and says, Chérie, chérie, chérie. And they start hugging and kissing. And the Germans were so mad at them for making a bottleneck that he told my father, go. And he never checked his paper. So love saved them another time.
Amazing.
And that's
Stronger than death. Sarah?
Yes, you mentioned before one of your themes is that the strength of women in the couple.
You mentioned earlier that one of the themes that you found in your stories was a powerful, strong woman.
Yes.
Can you kind of talk about that a little further?
yes.
We don't know the question. Well, that was my question, was that, and I know you just gave a good example of that with your mother, but when you, in your book, you said that that was the theme, and I wondered if you could just give some little snippets.
The question is, Mindelle, you've said that one of the themes throughout the stories in your book is the strength of the women
Right.
in each of the stories. And Sarah asks if you might share a few more tidbits
Okay.
about strong women.
I gave you the example of the bow story. That was another story in which the women, of the 20, of all the stories in the book, most of them have the woman in the lead in one way or another, hiding the person. Women were able, because women, because Jewish men had a bris, circumcision. So men were able to be identified right away as being Jewish. Women were able to not be easily identified, obviously, in that way. And many women in general were the people in the family that were out and about. A lot of times in the Orthodox Jewish families, the ones that I interviewed, the men were home, the older fathers were home studying and did not interact with the community as much as the women did. So the women knew how to dress and fit in with the community, did not stick out as being, let's say, an Orthodox man with wearing a certain type of an outfit. So they could meld into the atmosphere. That they could go into a store. They could hide somebody in that particular way that a man could not that a man could not get away with. But of the stories in the book, as you go through many of them, it's the woman who, again, saves the family because she's able to get out. She is able to blend into the community and save the family, get a job sometimes, cleaning, doing different work that many times a man could not.
Mindelle,
Yes.
thank you so much.
Oh, my.
Just, I suspect I speak for everybody here in saying this. I could sit here all night listening to stories and hearing you tell them, and what remarkable stories. Love stronger than death. Yeah. On this Yom HaShoah, we would like to join together in a service, and you will find the booklet, the handout for the service, on the music stand at the back of the room. And if, unless you picked one up on your way in, you may have.
While people get the sheets, how does one get your book?
Yeah, how does one get your book?
Oh, I happen to have some with me. I have a few with me.
There are some copies here, so talk to Mindelle
Yes,
afterwards.
and you give it, and I'm not taking any money for the book, so you can give a donation to the synagogue, okay? I usually do the Holocaust Museum, but since we're here, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you.
Hannah Charlson, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Rabbi.
Zev Charlson, thank you so
Is there
much.
any way you can make your mic?
No.
Or use this mic. So use the that's fine. Let's put that thing up also. Or just another music. No, I have one. I have one. Make sure we're on the camera. And we are. We got a copy of that. When do you want to do the candles? A moment of silence and the Torah and all that stuff.
I want to take the Torah out just before El Malach.
Okay.
This alluding to people doing names.
Okay.
Okay, so names here, and Torah out here. Maybe we'll light candle. Maybe we'll light the candle. We should light the candles at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I'll do this. I'll do Anima. I'll do Eli Eli, and then we'll light the candles. Get Dylan and Sophie. We're going to begin with a melody or two. Oh no! I'm looking at the camera to make sure that I'm in the shot.
It's on my laptop. I meant to do that.
Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam, hachol ve'hayam, rishru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tfilat adam, hachol ve'hayam, rishru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tfilat adam. O Lord my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the water, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of man, the
We begin with the lighting of Shoah memorial candles, and I want to invite our candle lighters to come forward. All of you, the children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren of survivors of the Shoah.
Help them with the candle, turn it over and do all that nonsense. Ani maamin, ani maamin, ani maamin. באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, בביאת המשיח אני מאמין, אני מאמין, אני מאמין, אני מאמין. באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, בביאת המשיח אני מאמין. אני מאמין. באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח אני מאמין, אני מאמין. באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח אני מאמין. ואף על פי שידממה עם כל זה, אחכה לו, אחכה לו, בכל יום שיבוא, בכל יום שיבוא. ואף על פי שידממה עם כל זה, אחכה לו, אחכה לו, בכל יום שיבוא, בכל יום שיבוא.
I believe with perfect faith in the coming of Mashiach. And though Mashiach may tarry, I will wait daily for Messiah's coming. We invite you to a few moments of silence, silent reflection. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzlingly yellow, Perhaps if the sun's tears would sing against a white stone. Such a yellow is carried lightly way up high. It went away, I'm sure, because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. For 7 weeks I've lived in here, penned up inside this ghetto. But I have found what I love here. The dandelions call to me, and the white chestnut branches in the court. Only I never saw another butterfly. That butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live here anymore in the ghetto. Our tradition at Beth Am Israel. Oh, good point. Our tradition at Beth Am Israel is to invite members of our community to share names of their own family members, of loved ones murdered in the Shoah, of loved ones no longer with us. We invite you to come forward if you wish to share names, and we'll begin with those on Zoom, inviting all who wish to share names either aloud or in the chat on Zoom at this time.
I'm glad to speak if you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Okay. As many of you know, both sides of my family have been affected by the Holocaust. Parents both came from the Carpathian Mountain area. My paternal and maternal grandparents both died, and their arrival to Auschwitz, the Samuel Heisler and Sarah Davidovich, my paternal grandparents, and my maternal is Avraham and Malka Stern, whom I'm named. My father was the 9th of 10 children. Several came to the United States, so he had an address of where he wanted to go. So he and his youngest brother were together in Auschwitz, and there's lots of stories that could be told. He lost one other brother in a work camp, Hungarian work camp, that the Nazis burned to the ground while the workers were there. His name was Mendy. And Mariam, his youngest sister, died after the war, after being in a concentration camp, died of typhoid and was buried in Germany. My mother, all 6 children, my mother's the 5th of 6, were in the camps. My mother was the second youngest. The youngest and her parent died along with her parents. Her name was Zisel. But interestingly, my mother survived with her 2 sisters. And I just want to take a moment to tell a little love story, since that was the theme of the night. My mother and her 2 sisters, Roshi and Lily, were exited together from the camp. And my Aunt Rosie, the eldest, twisted her ankle, and despite being very emaciated, all three of them, they refused to leave her and dragged her and carried her from there, where they came across the Polish partisans, whereas my Aunt Rosie put her eyes on my Uncle Yaakov, and they left for Israel shortly after that. My uncle's family had owned some property there, so they went to Israel in 1946, certificated, so they didn't have to come illegally. My mother and my aunt came on the second boat to the United States that were taking children, rescuing children. So my mother was all of 15, 16, and that's how they came. Well, the stories of how they came to the United States is pretty lengthy, but I did want to share the love story. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
In addition to working to preserve and honor the memory of my closest extended family on my website, shoahletters.org, tonight I wish to preserve and honor the memory of the unwilling martyrs, as my uncle Hugo Jelinek called himself in a letter to his oldest daughter in June 1939, unwilling martyrs. He was writing about her fighting in Israel, or then Palestine, Mandate Palestine. He said, you know what you're fighting for, but we here he was in Czechoslovakia, later to be deported from there. He said, here, we are unwilling martyrs. Anyway, the names are of my grandparents on both sides, Sigmund and Berta Jelinek and Matilda Eckstein. My uncles and aunts, Gisela and Leopold Jelinek Schlesinger, Hugo Jelinek and Fritzi Frankel, Siegfried and Martha Jelinek. Those were all uncles and aunts. And then my first cousins, Berta and Anna Jelinek, who were murdered at ages 20 and 19.
I'm here tonight to honor my grandparents, Julius and Marta Bear. My grandfather was was born in 1987. They were both sent to Theresienstadt, and that's where my grandfather died. My grandmother was then sent to Auschwitz, and that's where she perished. This evening, my daughter took her, there's an organization in Israel called Adopt a Savta, and it's to adopt the elderly survivors. And my daughter adopted a Savta, and tonight they went together to the memorial in Tel Aviv.
So this is a sad piece of paper that I put away in a certain place. I know where it is. And once a year I take it out to read it here. I'm going to read the names of the immediate family members of my mother and my father. There were many other relatives, but I'm just going to read them. First, my mother's family, the Suker family from Sosnovitz, Josek Suker, born March 1899. My maternal grandfather died August 1943, age 44, Auschwitz. Miriam Zucker, born June 1896. My maternal grandmother died August 1943, age 47, in Auschwitz. Toby Zucker, born January 1926 in Haifa. My aunt died August 1943, age 17, in Auschwitz. Atik Zucker, my uncle, born December 1930, died August 1943, age 12, Auschwitz. Gucha Zucker, my aunt, born August 1933, died August 1943, age 10, Auschwitz. My father's family, the Finkelstein family from Radom, Poland. Avram Finkelstein, my uncle, born November 1918, died July 1941, age 22, near Lvov, beaten to death by a Ukrainian mob. Aaron Finkelstein, my uncle, born August 1921, died July 1941, age 20, near Lvov, beaten to death by a Ukrainian mob. Jacob Noah Finkelstein, born April 1898, my paternal grandfather, died May 8, 1945, 4 days after liberation in Wels, Austria.
I'd like to remember my family. Both of my parents were survivors. They came from a small shtetl in Demblin. And my mother she was the youngest of 8 children. And she had 3 siblings that didn't make it through the war. She had a brother, Yankel, and he had a little baby. That would have been my first cousin. She had a sister, Basha, that ran away to Russia, but we never heard of her. And another sister, Esther Laya. And on my father's side, I lost my paternal grandfather, Tzvi Yehuda. And my parents were fortunate enough to have a lot of siblings that survived, but all of my uncles and aunts have passed away, and my parents have passed away. And one of the things that I'd like to bring to people's attention is we always, and rightfully so, commemorate all those people who perished. Sometimes I think we don't give enough credit or talk enough about how hard those people who survived really had it after the war. And as children of survivors, the ability to recreate life and to give opportunity to succeeding generations is a debt, an obligation, and gratitude that, although I rarely speak for others, I will say that every single child of survivors lives and remembers, not just on Yom HaShoah, but every day and every moment, and is a debt that can never be repaid.
Mendel Shaya Lieberman, Vavela Najman, Estela and the baby Najman, Shmila Najman, Nachaman Najman, Aaron Herschel, Hyedis Lieberman, Sarah Rachel Lieberman.
I would just, if you don't mind, I would just try to memorize my grandfather, Ruben Gergely, my uncle, Balin Julie, my aunt, Magda Abraham, my uncle, Laszlo Székely, my uncle, Tamás Lichtig, and my grandfather, Hugo Julie, and my grandmother, Bertha Kleyer. Thank you.
L'chol ish yesh shem. Each of us has a name, given by God and given by our parents. Each of us has a name, given by our stature and our smile, and given by what we wear. Each of us has a name, given by the mountains and given by our walls. Each of us has a name, given by the stars and given by our neighbors. Each of us has a name, given by our sins and given by our longing. Each of us has a name, given by our enemies and given by our love. Each of us has a name, given by our celebrations and given by our work. Each of us has a name, given by the seasons and given by our blindness. Each of us has a name, given by the sea and given by our death. We invite you to rise as you are able. We'll be taking from the ark our Shoah scroll, a Sefer Torah which itself is a survivor of the Shoah. And holding it in hand, joining with you in the words of El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer, which is on page 3.
El Mare
שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, ממעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את כל הנשמות של 6 מיליוני היהודים, חללי השואה באירופה, שנהרגו, שנשחטו, שנשרפו, ושניסו על קידוש השם בידי המרצחים הגרמנים, הנאצים ועוזריהם מהשאר עמים. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני ונחלתם בגן עדן די מנוחתם, ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ ימין, ונאמר
Amen. We join together. Exalted, compassionate God, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the souls of the men, women, and children who were slaughtered, burned, and killed in the Holocaust. May their memory be a blessing, and may they rest in paradise. Master of mercy, may they find perfect rest in the shadow of your wings. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life. Adonai is their portion. May they rest in peace. And let us say,
Amen.
Amen. We join together in the words of Kaddish Yatom, Mourner's Kaddish. Transliteration on page 3 at the bottom. You'll find the Hebrew text in the Siddur, page 207, if that's preferable. Yitgadal, v'yitkadash, shemei rabbah, v'alama divira kirute, v'amlich malchute, v'chaye chon v'yom echon, v'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv, v'imiru amen. Yeshmei Rabba Mivorach Le'olam L'Almei Maya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yit'aleh V'yithalal Shmei D'Kudisha B'richu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Da'amiran B'alma V'imru Amen. Yehei Shloma Rabba Min Shemaya V'chaim Aleinu
Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'imru Amen.
Oseh Shalom B'mromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel Ve'imru Amen.
Join together in the words of Hatikva. O Lord, Baleva Penima, Nefesh lieotam chofshi be'artzeinu eretz Zion Yerushalayim lieotam chofshi be'artzeinu eretz Zion Yerushalayim.
We thank you for being with us this evening. And, ask that as you make your way from this place, that you do so quietly. Good night.